Okay, so chapter 6 is regarding designing quality. So we've already talked about elements of quality in the companies in terms of their products and services, in terms of examples of quality service like counter service and so on. So in this chapter, it's focusing on how companies can design quality products and services. So these are the topics that are covered in chapter 6, and these are the learning outcomes or the lesson outcomes. Okay, so we'll start with the first topic on linking customer needs to design, production, and service delivery. So the VOC again was mentioned in the previous chapters, meaning the voice of customers. So it refers to the information that is collected from the customer by the company using the various methods that was discussed last time. So you have those surveys, you have these panel, yeah, you have what I call that uh, the field intelligence and so on. So these were the different methods that companies will use to collect the voice of customers in terms of their whether it's the feedback or whether it's the customer needs and so on. So that's the VOC. So in terms of ensuring quality products and services, so the VOC has to be linked with the design of the product or service, the production of the product, and the delivery of the product and services. Okay, so if you are able to link the voice of customers with these, then the company should be able to establish quality output, whether in terms of products and services. So it must consider the quality dimensions that are important to the customer. Okay, so the quality dimensions are also have been mentioned in the previous chapters, okay, whether depending on the product or service. So this is the dimensions or the uh, different categories that you get from the voice of customers. So the quality dimension in products or services, like for example, the durability. Okay, so how durable is the product, or other quality dimension in terms of the responsiveness. Okay, how fast the product responds when you are using the product. User friendliness and so on. So these are the quality dimensions that the customers look for. So the example given there, like in the online quality, online system quality. So the example of a company's online system, whether it's their website, whether it is the company's apps, okay, the apps they use that customers use online. So to have a quality online system, so customers will have certain high expectations on that online system. So in terms of content, okay, so the content of the website or the contents of the app of that company, it has to be relevant to the user or to the consumer, and the content has to be uh, how you say has to be the layout of the content must also be in a way that is not too uh, how you say terlalu sesak. In other words, the too much information on one screen and so on or one page, so that's not a good quality website or apps if all information is just crammed into one space. So you have to be able to make sure the contents are relevant but still uh, how you say it's spread out within the website or apps. Accuracy, so the content has to be accurate. Okay, so whatever is mentioned in the apps, for example, in terms of the features of the product being sold, through the company website or any services provided by the company through the online system has to be accurate. So whatever the customer reads on the website or app, that is exactly what they will get when they buy the product or they use the service. So the information has to be accurate. Ease of use. So again, the user friendliness of the online system. How easy is it for the customer to browse through the website, or how easy it is for them to use the app, and so on. So that is the expectation from customers. Timeliness. How responsive is the website or app? Does it take too long for the website to load the next page, or does it take too long for the app to process the next information that the customer wants? Aesthetics. So this is the design, the creative aspect of the online system. So how creative does the company develop their website? Is it just very bland, very boring, just white background and the text is there, but no pictures, no patterns, and so on? So that will not attract the customers. So even in terms of the aesthetics, the company must also take into consideration, because this is also something that is expected by the customer. And other dimensions when it comes to online system, the security of the customer. So when the customer uses the website or the app, they might have to key in certain personal information, their address or their My Card number, or when they make payments, they might have to key in the account number or the credit card number. So they have to make sure that this information is secure. So the customer has to give the assurance. Again, this is something that was mentioned last time in terms of the quality dimension, the assurance. Okay, the company's ability to give confidence to the customer that their information will be kept confidential. Okay, so these are just some examples of the dimensions that the customer expects in the context of the online system or website or app example. So a good way to link the customer needs with the design, production, and service delivery is through empowered employees. So you have to give more power, more responsibility to the employees who are directly involved with the design, production, and service delivery, because they are the ones who are directly involved in the process. So to ensure you have quality design, quality production, and quality service delivery, you have to give these employees more power in making the decisions and so on. Right? Like for example, in terms of the design, so the R&D, okay, research and development employees, so give them more power, more responsibility to design the product or service according to the needs of the customer. In terms of the manufacturing, the production process, so give more power to those involved in producing the product to determine how they are going to manufacture the product. And in terms of, for example, marketing, to give more power to the marketing employees in terms of making the decision how they are going to promote the product. Okay, because they have more connection with the information from the customer in terms of what they expect and what they need. So good communication is also important, especially between the company and the customer. So there must be communication in terms of the customer communicating with the company in terms of what they expect and what they want from the product and service. And the company should also communicate with the customer when it comes to things like the customer service. Okay? If a customer makes a complaint, so the company has to communicate properly so that the customer will be satisfied. Okay? That's why you need to have good communication between both sides. So next is the concept development and innovation. The concept development is the process of applying these three knowledge, scientific knowledge, engineering knowledge, and business knowledge to produce a basic functional design that meets the customer needs as well as meeting the requirements of the manufacturing and service delivery. So this is what you call the concept development, the definition. So when you want to produce your product or services, if you want to make sure that the product or service meets the needs of the customer, and at the same time, it also meets the requirements of the manufacturing process or the service delivery process, then you have to apply this knowledge. It's scientific knowledge, for example, in terms of the research, the information you collect from the customer in terms of their needs. And again, this was also mentioned last time. So you have the companies, they do the surveys, they do the panel, right? And then they collect the information, and then they analyze information. So that is a scientific process. Okay, and that's how the company will obtain the information they need to determine what the customer wants from their product or service. And then the engineering knowledge is where the company needs to have the proper knowledge in terms of how to manufacture or how to produce the product. Okay, what is the appropriate machine or tools that are needed to ensure that they are able to produce the product that meets the requirements. And thirdly, business knowledge in terms of things like marketing, right? So you need the knowledge of marketing to ensure that you're able to attract the customer to buy your product or service. And business knowledge also, things like, as mentioned in the previous chapter, the ability of the company to obtain or to acquire the materials from the supplier at a lower cost. Okay, so if the company wants to save cost, they need to be able to get the quality material for them to produce their product at a lower cost, and that requires business knowledge. So when the company applies all these three aspects, then they should be able to produce, the product or service that meets the customer's needs and also meets the manufacturing and service delivery requirements. So that's the quality that you have there, okay, from the concept development. So this concept development also related to innovation and creativity. So obviously we all are familiar with the two concepts, but sometimes we tend to get a bit confused. What exactly is the difference between innovation and creativity? So innovation, the general idea is that innovation is that you are creating something new. Okay, you are creating something new in terms of the product or service. Okay, this is just a simple way to define it. And for creativity, it means that you are taking something that already exists, but applying a new approach to the existing product. Okay, you think of how you can use the product in a new way, or how you can use a product in a novel or in a unique or different way. That is creativity. All right, that's how we can differentiate. So innovation is something new, and creativity is something existing in a new way. So for innovation, it involves these four categories. A new product, yeah, that's the main one that was mentioned just now. You produce a new product that has never been done before, or it can also involve a first type in a product category. So you produce a product that is the first of its kind for that category. So that example mentioned yesterday with 3C, the shoe, yeah, this is probably an old example as well. But last time they have these shoes that had those wheels at the back. Okay? Sometimes the children like to use it, even some adults also use that. Okay, so you have the shoes with those wheels at the back, and besides walking, they can also glide using the wheel. Okay, that's a innovation for that particular category of product. Okay, the shoe. I'm not sure whether people use it anymore, but that was a thing that was an innovation during that particular time, many years ago. And then you have the third one is major improvements, meaning you make very large improvements to a product. Right? This is different from creativity, because creativity you're using the product in a new way. But for innovation, you are making major improvements. Penambahbaikan terhadap produk yang sedia ada. That's also innovation. And number 4 is modest improvement. So you're making just very slight or minor improvements to an existing product or service. So that is the 4 categories of innovation. And the process of innovation is built on research and development. Okay, so innovation usually comes from the R&D of the company. So they will research, they will think about, what are the new products that they can produce, or what are the new services they can provide. Okay, that'll be the role of the research and development. So for creativity, it is achieved through brainstorming. Right? So it's not just the R&D, it can be any employee in the company. Okay, and then they are involved in this group where they will brainstorm. Okay, they discuss about how they can use the existing product in a new way. And that's how they come up with the creative ideas, through brainstorming. And creativity is also achieved through this theory of inventive problem solving. So the theory of inventive problem solving involves answering the question, what is the product or service intended to do? Okay, so what is the product or service originally intended to do? What is the original purpose of the product or service? And from there, they will try to look at how they can use the product in a different or a new way. And that's the process of creativity. Right? So this is the differentiation between these two concepts. So design for product and service. So companies may have some structured product development process. Okay, so it depends on the company. They might have different approaches or different structures in terms of the product and service design. But this is the general structure of the process. So it starts with idea generation, meaning you come up with the idea, whether it's the R&D or the brainstorming. So you generate the idea of the product or service, and then it moves to the preliminary concept development. So that is where the company will then establish the blueprints or those plans in terms of producing the product or service. So just very simple outline or blueprint. And from there, it moves to the product or process development, meaning that they produce the prototype, or they produce a sample of the product or service to determine whether it is marketable. And if they feel the product is okay, then it will move to the full-scale production process. Okay, so they will produce it the full scale. Okay, they will produce the mass production, and then from there they move to the market introduction. So the marketing section will then promote this new product And then from there, they sell the product to the customer. And then once the customer has used the product, then they have the market evaluation. So they will evaluate or they will assess the customer feedback towards the new product. So this is the general structure of the product and service development process. Okay, next is the product development design. So this is known as the quality function deployment, or QFD. Okay, quality function deployment. So this approach was developed by the Japanese, and it was later adopted by the US. This is just a brief history of this approach. So why do companies need the quality function deployment? So the reason is because that the voice of the customer, again, the information regarding the customer needs, can be lost in translation and subsequent interpretation by design and production channel. In other words, when they get the voice of customers, it can be misinterpreted when it is in the design process or in the production process. Okay, that it happens. It can happen in companies where they misinterpret or they misunderstand the needs of the customer. And that's why you need this quality function deployment. So an example of this problem of the voice of customer lost in translation, suppose that the customer needs is that they want a car that you can start easily. Okay, you can start the car easily. So when this information is then sent to the design process, for example, so the employees in the design process, they are very technical. Okay, they use technical language. So when they see the customer needs that they want the car to start easily, for them it means the car will start after a few seconds of continuous cranking, meaning you turn the ignition with the car key. So after several seconds, the car should start. But that is not what the customer meant. Customer simply said they want the car to start easily. So the message was lost. Okay, the message was misinterpreted by the technical team. So what the customer wants, if they have the good QFD and they're able to interpret the customer's needs properly, then they'll know that the customer, they want to own a car that is easy to start. So now you have examples of these car companies that have replaced the ignition key with a start button. Okay, I'm sure you're familiar already with these new models of cars. So just tekan je butang dan dia terus start. Okay, tak sampai dosa. So that is what the customer meant by owning a car that is easy to start. Okay, and that's the example of how a company has properly translated the customer needs, and they produce this car with the button to replace the key. All right, so that is the reason why companies need the QFD. So the development of the basic functional design involves translating customer needs into measurable technical requirements. Okay, so whatever the customer needs, the company must translate into something that can be measured. Like the example of when they say they want a car that is easy to start, so they have to translate into something measurable. Okay, so in this case, the measurement is how fast the car will start once they turn the ignition or they push the button. Okay, so they compare. So they have the conventional cars. Okay, when you turn the ignition key, probably takes about 2 or 3 seconds to start. Yeah, and then they develop this car with the button. Just push the button, and in 1 second, the car will start. Okay, and that's how they measure the customer needs. And same thing applies to any other quality dimension that the customer wants. So the objective of QFD is to enable a company to organize and analyze the information associated with the product or service. Okay, so having a quality function deployment enables the company to organize the information from the customer. Okay, so they can organize, for example, according to the quality dimension. So they get this information, so they organize it into the category of accessibility. They get another information, they organize into another category of durability. So once they collect all the information, they organize it, then they can analyze. And from there, they can determine what the customer wants in terms of the products or service. So next is the preventive action rather than reactive action. So having a QFD will ensure that the company is more proactive, right? Lebih proactive in ensuring the quality of the product. So when you have the QFD, you can interpret the customer needs, you organize information, then you know what the customer wants and what the customer does not want. Okay, they already know. Before they make the product, they know what they want, what they don't want, so they can produce the product according to the customer's requirements. And this will save time, because if they don't have the QFD, they just make the product, they sell the product, the customer uses the product, and then they give their feedback to the company. All right, so this is the part of the product that the customer likes, they don't like. Yeah, this is a problem with the product, or this is the weakness of the product. They get through the feedback, and that is more reactive. So the company will then improve the product based on the reaction of the customer, and that takes time. But having a QFD, they already know what the customer wants, they don't want, so they make the product that is very close to the customer's needs, and they will have very little problem in terms of the feedback. So that's one of the objectives. And fulfill customers' needs and wants. Obviously, this is also a main objective, because you want to produce the product and services that fulfills the customer's needs and wants. So if you do that, the customer will be satisfied, and you will develop customer loyalty. So the benefits of QFD. What are the advantages? So the first one is, it is obviously customer focused, because you're focusing on the customer needs, what they want, what are the requirements. So this will ensure that the company is always customer oriented. Dia akan keluarkan produk atau perkhidmatan yang dikehendaki oleh pengguna. Time efficient, it saves time. So again, as I mentioned just now, an example of the preventive and versus the reactive. So the company saves time. They already know what the customer wants in the product or service, and they produce it. Okay? And they save time in terms of not having to wait for the customer feedback to determine how to improve the product. So they save time. Okay? So time efficient. Teamwork oriented. So the QFD requires the cooperation from the different sections in the company. Right? You need the cooperation between the research and development, okay, to know what are the needs of the customer, and they have to cooperate with the design and technical team, so they can design the product according to the needs of the customer, And the marketing also must cooperate to be able to promote the product to the customer. So it's a teamwork oriented approach and documentation oriented. So again, as mentioned now as well, the information about the customer's needs will be documented. Okay, they organize information, they analyze information, everything is in black and white. So they have the guidelines in terms of what the customer needs and how to relate that or link the customer needs to the production process or the design and production process. All right, so these are the benefits of the QFD. Okay, so next we're going to the different tools or models for linking the customer needs with the design and production and service delivery. So we have two models that we're going to look at. First one is house of quality, and the other one is the gap analysis. So the house of quality is a graphic tool. Okay, it is a graphic tool to define the relationship between the customer needs and the company's capability. It is a way to visualize, a graphic tool to visualize the link between the customer needs with the company's ability to meet the customer needs. Okay, so from this tool, they can determine what they need to do in order to provide the product or services that meets the customer needs. So it is a set of matrices or a matrix, meaning you have, if you look at the illustration in the later slides, it shows the matrices or these different variables that will be used to relate the voice of customers to the product's technical requirements, the component requirements, process, control, and so on. So it will use these matrices, okay, to show the relationship or the link between the voice of customers with the design, production, and service delivery. Sorry. So it is, again, house of quality is part of the QFD. It is one of the tools used for QFD. And again, it uses the planning matrix. And again, you can just refer to the illustration in the later slides to see this example. So the reason it's called the house of quality because the graphic or the illustration is shaped like a house. It's virtually shaped like a house. So each part of this house will represent different matrix that will be used to link the customer needs with the production, design, and service delivery. Okay, so the design of the house of quality is based on the belief that products should be designed to reflect customer desires and tastes. Okay, and also reported to increase cross-functional integration within the organization. Again, going back to that benefit of QFD, where it is teamwork oriented. So the house of quality is a model that will encourage or promote the teamwork. Okay, the cross-functional integration, just another word to indicate the teamwork or cooperation between different sections in the company. Okay, so this is the example of the structure of the house of quality. Okay, so you have basically 6 components of the house of quality. Okay, I think in the next slide it also explains further what are the 6 areas. Okay, so I think we'll just take a brief break, and then when we come back, we'll go into these 6 components of the structure of the house of quality. Okay, so we'll continue after this break. right, so let's continue with the structure of the house of quality. So we have the 6 components that make up the house of quality. So first one is the voice of customer. That's always the basic component. Right, the voice of customer is the basic component of the house of quality. So again, this refers to the information that you get from the customer in terms of what they want, their needs, the customer requirements of the product or service. And then you have the technical requirements. Right, so the second one, the technical requirement is to meet the customer requirements. The manufacturer works to certain performance specifications and requires the supplier to do the same. Okay, so the technical aspect of linking the customer needs with the design, production, and service delivery. So the technical requirement in terms of the technical part or technical aspects of the production process, and also the technical aspects of the supplier, the pembekal. So the supplier who will supply the company with the materials they need to produce the product. So they have to fulfill the technical requirements in order to meet the customer needs. And then number 3, interrelationship, is the more or less the roof of the house. So the trade-off or the interrelationship. So this is where the trade-offs are identified. So trade-offs relating to manufacturers' requirements. So when you say trade-off, it's sort of like when they compensate one component that is lacking with another component, where they will give more features. So that's a trade-off between what the customer needs and the manufacturing requirement. So again, just a simple example to illustrate using the smartphone again. So supposing that the customer needs, in terms of the smartphone, they need durability. So customer needs a phone that is durable, okay, that can last a long time, or durable in terms of being able to still function even though they drop the phone and so on, right? But supposing that the manufacturer or the company, they are unable to fulfill that requirement of durability, maybe due to lack of the material for them to produce a durable phone. So to compensate the lack of durability, so the trade-off happens. Okay, so they lack durability, but the company will then provide additional features in terms of, for example, the responsiveness of the phone. They make it more responsive. Okay, it's faster to process, okay, the information, or uh, to open an app or any program on the phone. It opens up faster. So that's the trade-off that happens, and this usually happens a lot in the manufacturing of products. So sometimes they cannot fulfill the requirement of the customer in certain parts, so they will compensate with focusing on other components or other features of the product. So that's what you call the interrelationship. The planning matrix. Okay, so the component 4, okay, on the right hand side of the house. So there are 2 things actually here: the priorities of customer requirements and competitive evaluation. So the priorities of the customer requirements means that in the planning process of the design and production, they have to prioritize the customer needs. Okay, that must always be the priority, keutamaan dalam perancangan, design dan juga production. And for the competitive evaluation, it means that in the planning process, the company must also evaluate the product and service of the competitor. Okay, pesaing mereka, dan mereka juga perlu menilai produk atau perkhidmatan yang diberikan oleh pesaing mereka supaya mereka dapat membuat perancangan dari segi produk mereka sendiri. So they can compare the competitor's product with their own design and see how they can improve and it can match the competitor's products. And then the fifth component, the relationship matrix. So this is the part where the customer's needs are converted into manufacturing terms. So it's more or less like the main room, okay, the main section of the house. So that is where they go through the actual process of manufacturing the products. Okay, after all the planning, after they link the customer needs, so they will have this production process or manufacturing process. And the sixth component, okay, the sort of like the, you can say, the basement of the house. Okay, so the technical requirement priorities. Okay, they call it the floor, or sometimes they say the basement. It is where the manufacturer's critical process requirements are prioritized. Okay, so they give the priority to the requirements of the manufacturing. Okay, syarat-syarat ataupun keperluan dari segi proses pembuatan perlu diberi keutamaan juga. So it's not just about giving priority to the customer needs, it must also fulfill the requirements of the manufacturing process. Again, that's where we talk about the concept development just now. Okay, so you have to have the product and services that meets the customer needs as well as fulfilling the production or manufacturing requirements. So this is what you call the house of quality. So there are 6 steps in building the house of quality. Okay, so you have to identify customer requirements. That is, of course, the main one. Identify what the customer needs, and identify the technical requirements. Okay, what are the requirements in terms of the manufacturing process? Okay, what do you require to produce the product? Number 3, relate the customer requirements to the technical requirements. So you just relate the first and second step. Okay, you link the first step and second step. Number 4, conduct an evaluation of competing products or services. Okay, the competitive evaluations now. Right, so you have to you evaluate your competitors' products. And number 5, evaluate technical requirements and develop target. So you evaluate the technical requirements of the production process. And number 6, you determine the technical requirements, which requirements to deploy in the remainder of production or delivery process. So once you evaluate the technical aspects of your manufacturing process, you determine which one will be used. So these are the 6 steps in building the house of quality. So this is a much more detailed look at the house of quality. Okay, so the house of quality provides the marketing function. With an important tool to understand customer needs and give top management strategic direction. So the role the role of the house of quality is to give, not just for the production process, but even for the marketing section. So it gives them the tool to understand the customer needs so that they can design or develop the appropriate marketing and promotion advertisements. And for the management, it gives the management information on how to determine the strategic direction of the company. So this is the benefits or the role of the house of quality for the marketing and management components of the company. Okay, but for the house of quality, it's only the first step in the overall quality function deployment process. So there are 3 other house of qualities which are used to deploy the voice of customers, usually in the manufacturing setting. Okay, so you have the component part characteristic, the process planning and quality control, right? So the component part characteristic is the characteristics of the components that you're going to use for the manufacturing process of your product. So you must also look at the characteristics of each component separately. So do these components, do they fulfill the requirements to produce the product that will meet customer needs? And the process planning is the planning of the process of producing the product from start to finish. And quality control is where you, like we discussed in the previous chapter, you do the inspection and the testing of the product to make sure that it meets the requirements of not just the manufacturing requirements, but also the customer requirements. Okay, so this is the 4-phase QFD approach. All right, so just the explanation of the additional approach for the QFD. Sorry. So the again, you have these 4 houses. Right? So you have the product planning, assembly or part deployment, process planning, and the process quality control. So for the product planning, that is where you define and prioritize the customer needs, all the things that we have mentioned already just now. And then assembly and part deployment, you identify the critical parts, the component part characteristic. And then the process planning, you determine the process flow of the manufacturing, from start to finish and so on. And the process or quality control, as I mentioned now, that is where you check the quality of the finished product. Okay, so you go through the inspection, you check whether there are any defects or any part that does not meet the criteria, and you also test the product whether it fulfills the specifications or requirements. Okay, so the second model that we'll go through is the gap analysis. So the gap analysis is mostly used to measure the services. Okay, so for the house of quality, it's more towards product. Gap analysis is more towards service. So it basically involves the idea of good communication or good understanding between the customers and the employees of the company. So having a good understanding between both sides will ensure a more positive perception by the customer towards the quality of service provided by the company. Right? A good understanding, or in other words, good communication. All right, so these are the ones who had developed the gap analysis. So the advantage or benefits to the service provider, okay, by having this gap analysis, the company knows in terms of how to narrow the gap between them and the customer in terms of providing the quality service. So it'll help them identify what they need to do, okay, to provide quality service. And the benefit to the customer is that they will receive better quality service and better information from the company regarding the service they are receiving. So this is the illustration of the gap analysis. Okay, the later slides will talk about the different gaps. Okay, so we have the gap 1 between the expected service and the management perception of customer expectations. Gap 2, the gap between the management perception with service quality specifications. Gap 3, between the quality specification and service delivery. Gap 4, service delivery between service delivery and external communication to the customer. And gap 5 is between the the customer's expectations with the perceived expectations. So gap 1, 2, 3, and 4 involves the company, and gap 5 involves the customer. So you can see that at the top, there are 3 factors that will influence the customer expectation on the service quality. Okay, whether it's the past experience, meaning they had used the service in the past. So this will determine the customer's expectation about the service that they will use. Or the personal needs, okay, what the customer needs from the service will influence their expectation. And the word of mouth communication. Okay, komunikasi secara lisan. For example, your family or your relatives or your friend, they tell you about this service. Okay, so they explain to you verbally or word of mouth, and this also will shape your expectations of the service that you are going to use. And the perceived service referring to the actual perception once you have used the service. So do you perceive the service to have good quality or poor quality? Okay, and that's the gap 5, the gap between what you expect and what you actually perceive, okay, from using the service. For gap 1 is the gap between the management perception of customer expectation with the actual customer expectation. So the gap comes from the fact that there is a different perception between the management and the customer. Okay, so as the customer, we have certain expectations of the service, but the management of the company, they have their own perception, which might not be accurate. And that's why you have the gap. Okay, the gap between, or the gap 1 between the management perception and customer expected service. So the managers and the employees of the company, they have a very internal process-oriented view of their business, which is tough to change. Okay, to change it into seeing what the customer actually expects. So the perception of the management in terms of what the customer expects is just based on their internal process. Okay, based on what the company had studied or researched. So they develop the persepsi terhadap ekspektasi pengguna yang mungkin tak sama dengan apa yang pengguna sebenarnya menjangkakan terhadap perkhidmatan yang ditawarkan. And this is something that is very difficult to change in companies because they have this internal process that they have, to sort of like predict what the customer expects, and they don't try to uh, take the initiative to actually see what the customer expects, and that is what causes the gap. And then for the second gap between the management perception of customer expectation with the service quality specifications. So the manager's expectation of the service quality may not match the service quality specifications because it is based on their perception, persepsi pihak pengurusan yang mungkin tidak tepat. Okay? The perception might not be accurate. So it will be different from the company's service quality specifications. So you have the gap between what the management perceives with the actual specification of the service quality. So it all goes back to making sure the management must understand what the customer wants or expects, not what the not based on what the management thinks the customer wants. They must know what the customer wants. Then they can narrow the gap between the management perception with the service quality specification. Okay, that's how you narrow the gap. Okay, by understanding what the customer wants, then you can match with the service quality specification of the company. Gap 3, the delivery gap. So the gap between the service quality specification with service delivery. So this is where you have the role of the employees, because they are the ones who are going to deliver the service. So the gap happens because sometimes the employees, they are lacking in certain areas. So the employee might lack training. They might lack the communication skills, or they are lacking in terms of preparation, which causes them to provide poor service delivery. And that's where you have the gap. The specifications are there. Okay, spesifikasi untuk mereka menyampaikan perkhidmatan dengan berkualiti, tapi disebabkan kerja mereka tak ada latihan atau tak ada komunikasi, tak ada persediaan, jadi mereka tak dapat menyampaikan perkhidmatan mengikut spesifikasi. And that's why you have the gap. So to reduce the gap, then you need to make sure the employees have proper training, make sure your employees have the communication skills, and make sure your employees are always prepared. Then you can narrow the gap between the specifications with the service delivery. Gap 4 is known as the communication gap. So the differences between service delivery and external communication with the customer. Meaning that you have the external communication, meaning the advertisement, the promotion of your service. So in your advertisement, okay, your iklan, syarikat, they promise one thing regarding the service they provide. But the actual service delivery, they give something else. Okay? They deliver the service not according to what they had promised in the advertisement. Okay? So lain yang dipromosikan, lain pula yang diberikan kepada pengguna. And that's why you have the gap in terms of the communication gap. Okay, because the customer expects something from the service based on your advertisement. Or, like we mentioned now, they also expect the service quality based on the word of mouth. Okay, what other people tell them about the service. So if what they hear from other people or from the advertisement, but they get something else, then this will cause a negative customer perception. So to narrow the gap, the company has to make sure that what they advertise to the customer, that is the same thing that will be delivered to the customer. Then you narrow the gap, and you will also get more positive customer perception. Okay, that's how you narrow gap 4. And then gap 5, the service gap. So difference between the expected service, the customer's expectations, with the perceived service or the perception of the service. Okay, and again, it's on the part of the customer. So if the company is able to narrow the gaps 1 through 4, then this will ensure that gap 5 will also be narrowed. So it's all interconnected. Okay, so syarikat perlu merapatkan jurang antara gap 1 sehingga gap 4. Kalau mereka dapat lakukan sedemikian, jadi gap 5 dapat dikurangkan. Meaning that what the customer expects is also what they perceive when they use the service, and they will give a positive perception. But the other way around, if the company does not narrow the gap, okay, for gaps 1 until 4, then the customer will have a negative perception. So the gap 5 will still remain there. Right, so that's the gap 5. So again, how to close the gap. So again, already mentioned now. So for gaps 1 through 4 for the company, thoughtful system design. So this is to close gap 1 and gap 2. All right, thoughtful system design. So you have to have an internal process that enables the company to know and to understand what the customer expects from their service. So they have to break away from the old method of the internal process, okay, and develop a new system that enables them to understand the customer's expectations. Number 2, careful communication with the customer. So this is to close the gap 4. It's service delivery with the external communication with the customer. So the advertisements that the company produces for the service must they have to make sure that the advertisement is the same as what they will deliver to the customer. And then train the workforce, okay, to provide consistently outstanding customer service. So this is for the gap 3. Okay, so again, you make sure you have the employees get the proper training, they have the good communication skills, they have experience, okay, they're able to prepare, then they're able to narrow the gap for gap 3. Okay, so we have actually finished 6 on designing quality. So if there are no questions so far, then we'll end the class for today. So just a few reminders, just to repeat what we have mentioned earlier on. So the presentation of your topic, okay, for the assignment will be after the festive break, okay, on the 4th of January. And then for the syllabus, we hopefully will be able to finish by the final week of ODL. So next Tuesday, we'll go into chapter 7, which is on measuring quality. in the organization. Okay, so with that, we'll end the class for now, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. So stay safe. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, sir.